Uh, Hello, community, world, whoever's listening in, whoever gets roped into this accidentally or purposefully by the algorithm, depending on how much time you're consciously or unconsciously priming the pump with online consumption. Um, it was compelled to make this video, date being October 22nd, 2025, um, because, and it's hard to, in this current moment in human history, we take all of these vlogs that people feel like they need to make, myself included, to just capture this absolutely insane moment of human history that we're in. I can't wrap my head around everything specifically, but there's something going on, particularly in the heart of the global imperial core, the United States of America. There's something going on with just a complete manufacturing of progressive ideals masquerading as pseudo-socialists in order to try and lure people into thinking, um, hmm, maybe there's a way that finally our knight in shining armor, our messiah that was promised, is gonna just come out of left field and pull us out of whatever we've got going on in this moment in time, just as a refresh. And I don't give a fuck whatever YouTube does with regards to censorship, or if this gets banned in the black hole because I'm going to be saying some words that the corporate overlords of this platform don't want me to say. But there has been a genocide going on that has been receiving complete political, military, and financial support from the United States, including with boots on the ground, both with private contractors, with the fake NGO, in reality, just again private military contractors, essentially like another like corporate terrorist group like Blackwater rebranded. And they were fucking fundraising for this group. You could send them, and we're having people, just, the bureaucratic elite, deeply embedded in Washington, just trying to sell this like this was a U.S. government-led aid package for the Palestinians. Well, not exactly U.S. government-led, but being filtered through an NGO. Well, they just started fucking shooting Palestinians trying to get food. They turned places that they were hawking as aid areas, offering in a just disgusting display of sadism, as they're aiding in the extermination of the Palestinian people. They then say, "Oh, hey, we have some gifts for you. We're going to give you some microscopic shred of human dignity and let you fucking eat." And they proceed to herd them into kill boxes, which is what these aid centers become. And then the Palestinians are killed by the dozens, by the hundreds, just over and over again in events like that. And then there's a drone strike in a refugee camp. There's 20 more people People just be walking through ruins, and then there's a drone hovering, just annihilates somebody. Just, they're at this point, uh, get something straight here. And I swear that this is all going to connect with what I was talking about with U.S. progressive sheepdogging as socialists, as people that actually want to change America from the globe bestriding genocidal thieving empire that it is, with occupied Palestine being controlled by the illegitimate Zionist government of Israel, as a forward operating base. Essentially, like, if we want to get a video game reference in here, what would we call it? Like, just a not remotely funny version of like Shadow Moses or something, or like Outer Heaven gone wrong. In the MGS series, Inner Hell. Ooh, the inverse. But like, everyone has seen what's been going on over there. There's no going back. Everyone knows, and anyone who's actually not trying to shelter themselves but is actively seeking the truth, we don't know what to do about it, or we can't agree on a common solution, even though it is absolutely imperative at this point. But we all know, and US media will make it seem like people here are on board with this. Anyone with any sense left in here that hasn't had like their brains dribble out their ears knows that this place is a empire wheezing its last few breaths. Anyone who isn't delusional knows that. We are going through an authoritarian crackdown, as it's just becoming more and more apparent that the authoritarian government that we live under, that started really crafting the surveillance state into overdrive after, God, I was 8 when it happened. I've given out too many details with that, I guess, but 8 when 9/11 happened. You can't comprehend at that age that that's going to be the thing that turns into all of this. But that, for me, like, I do remember that day mostly because of just the adults overwrought with emotion, and just seeing, I saw the footage that they just played over and over again. That, if you don't think 9/11 was, and I'm a materialist, I'm someone that likes making hypotheses and inferences about the world through utilization of the 5 main senses, but you can't tell me that they weren't trying to actually break people's brains on a mass psychological scale by showing the images of the planes crashing into the buildings, crashed in the middle of a field in Pennsylvania, crashed into the Pentagon. You can't tell me that that was not a mass manufacturing of consent for the U.S. global imperial war machine. And really the beginning of the end. We forget, the U.S. Culture Manufacture Factory has really been trying their best to memory hole the Iraq War. Just the unjustified butchering of what ended up being 1 million Iraqis after the already, if you look, it's pretty clear that this was another manufactured conflict, primarily just in the interest of trying to gain cheap political points. Fuck George H.W. Bush, too. Just as much as W. Actually, in a lot of ways, more so because H.W. was the CIA director, along with being vice president of the Reagan administration. Can you imagine what this guy got into? Yeah, he also, him and Lil Bushy, I think they were both Skull and Bones, right? Is that the one they were part of, or were they part of a different one? You know, I'm not as brushed up on the secret societies, um, but yeah, that war and the war in Afghanistan, the psychic charging from 9/11 just caused people to think that these were things that had to happen. Honestly, adults around that time, like looking back on it now that I've got a little bit of time to marinate on previous childhood events and interactions that I've had, and you just see people that you respect that were a generation ahead of you just brush off like it wasn't a part of the zeitgeist, and social media hadn't fully kicked in. um it was just starting to when the absolute worst of the, which US is still in there in a limited capacity, that is, you know, uh there's there's definitely a US presence there, even if I believe at this moment there aren't supposed to be US bases in Iraq, um and that they've supposedly fully withdrawn from Afghanistan. One, US works with Pakistani ISI and the military government there anyway, so they're a hop, skip, and a jump away. Which, you know, again, sorry I'm all over the place with the disparate thoughts, but everything is interconnected to what I am going to be talking about, I promise. And by the end of it, you'll probably still say, what the hell was his point? And yeah, just chalk it up to the world's insane and it broke this man's brain. Um, I disagree, but let me continue on with my point. Um, like, yeah, just recently, Pakistan fired missiles across the Afghanistan border. We had the very brief but intense contested border conflict between Cambodia and Thailand. You had the brief conflict between India and Pakistan, the Sudanese civil war, that is a broad proxy war that's been awful. The proxy conflict of Uganda and Rwanda supplying DR Congo rebel groups that are honestly just a rebranding from a war that never truly ended and is one of the worst wars in human history, the Congolese Civil War. They are being supplied, Uganda and Rwanda are being supplied by the US government. So that, like, just, you know, I guess I just picked, like, this night vision goggle off of the ground. So, you know, like, they're getting supplied with advanced grade weaponry and equipment. And I am sorry, I'm not fully brushed up on what's going on, but I know South Africa was talking about supporting DR Congo and supplying troops Um, like I've said, it's just hard to keep my brain wrapped around everything, but um, solidarity with DR Congo, and you know why they want that land. Uh, in terms of natural resources, one of the wealthiest places on Earth. When you destabilize regions, fuel war, set up puppet governments, fund proxy wars, you keep resources cheap. It greases the wheels of the capitalist machine. It provides more fertile ground to set up corrupt governments that are going to impoverish their own people at the expense of multinational corporations and finance capital. So, war is this is why this system needs to change, is that war is it opens up new markets and frontiers. It is a the reason that capitalism started in the first place was in Western Europe primarily, but particularly in England, when really that revolution, the capitalist revolution, was fully, if essentially like crystallized, and there was no going back after the Glorious Revolution there, when William of Orange um, married into the English monarchy. Um, and sorry, I'm not super brushed up on the details with that either, just that general time frame. But within the UK, what was going on there is it was primarily large landowners, noblemen, that were aligning more with commercial principles and trying to gain value from their land, enhancing productivity in their land. And to do that, they needed to take some of it that didn't belong to them. They just started booting peasants off of land, fencing off territory, and, they had the resources to have retainers. And before it got, well, it's kind of a long history, but at first the crown was kind of amenable to enclosures, but then there were several monarchs that actually tried to curb the frankly just land theft that was occurring, of nobles stealing peasant plots and then forcing the peasants back uh, into the fold, working under capitalist tenants that were living on the landlord's estate with subset plots. And then most of the peasants that were not the rich landlord tenant capitalist tenants, they were forced to work for just barely enough to even maintain a pitiful existence, while including public parish funds supplementing the abysmal wages that they were being paid, because the capitalist tenant farmers living on the nobleman's land that was primarily gained through theft, um, they would be kicking up to the landlord, and they didn't really care what rent the landlord was setting their rates at. They'll just be like, oh, well, you know, there's way more peasants than farm to go around, so I'll just take my pick of the litter of the, um, in Marx's terms, would be called the reserve army of the unemployed. I'll just take whoever I want, basically pay them just enough to be able to afford like one pitiful meal, and then I'll make a nice tidy profit for myself and just kick up a little bit more to the guy's land that I'm on. So that's when you created like that mass dispossession, a lot of that home economy stuff of peasants being able to have their own plots, raise their own livestock, use public pasture and field areas for said livestock, as well as growing additional crops for each other. That was all stolen by noblemen with force at first. There's nothing voluntary about how this stuff came into being. And uh, basically, after that, like I said, with a little bit, but not that much moderation by the English crown, that state of affairs continued where the crown essentially ended up working alongside noblemen to set up markets throughout the country through setting up laws that were benefiting the um, newly ascendant or noblemen still had a little bit of purchase. uh, what was I saying? The crystallization, 1688. Yeah, even at the beginning of the 17th century, like noblemen still had a little bit of purchase in England. But another reason why the revolution occurred in England, really like the and first capitalist revolution going full bore, first um, like striking of the flame of the Industrial Revolution really kicked in England because it had a relatively like weaker noble class in terms of its retainers, in terms of its coercive authority in comparison to noblemen in France, for example. So um, it was a situation where the bourgeoisie in England, which is merchants, firm owners that might have formerly been guild masters, capitalist farmers that were either noblemen turned capitalists or renting on large noble estates. Um, they were the ascendant power, and they had the support of uh, the crown more so than the noblemen, that they didn't want to just keep seizing land, and the crown worked with the bourgeois class in establishing, um, basically doing away with any kinds of in-kind crop exchanges for these agricultural laborers. Everything was measured by price. And somehow it just seems to work that every time things are end up being quantified by a price versus being handled through in-kind trading, it's always the little guy that seems to get fucked over a little bit more, and it's because they are dealing in persistently unequal transactions where they are dealing with parties that would be um, acquiring their products that have capital and they have none, and they just have to sit and take whatever price they can get at that point. And in addition to being dispossessed of their land, um, with these peasants just being turned out, there wasn't enough room in the countryside for everyone to work anymore. And with that home economy of peasants' land being taken, destroyed, they couldn't provide for themselves anymore. The commodities that they would make for, well, I guess they wouldn't be commodities because they weren't articles that were being meant to be bought and sold. They would just make all of their own resources. All of that was stripped away from them. So people flocked into cities. Well, people would also initially in England flocked to water mills when that was the main source, but when Watt came with the steam engine, that changed everything. That really allowed for the ability of centralization of production within cities with masses of laborers that would be able to leverage economies of scale to produce massive amounts of commodities at dirt cheap costs and at honestly causing a mass death event in England amongst laborers thrown into the thresher there. So yeah, that was the beginning of. I don't want to, let's not call this the end, but we are moving into the terminal stages of capitalism. This is not sustainable anymore. The global epicenter and owner of the world reserve currency, the United States of global capitalism, is dying, and it's people in the United States. We need to get real, and I brought up all of this stuff about the Industrial Revolution, about all of the horrible proxy wars going on, U.S.-backed genocides on multiple occasions in the 21st century. Don't forget about Libya. Don't forget about Syria. Don't forget about just having a drone base in Niger. But they actually got the boot. Solidarity with Niger. But also, the U.S. has tried coups in Venezuela and Bolivia recently. There's that mega prison in El Salvador that people are just, through racial profiling, being deported to from the United States. Yeah, we're such a free country. And now, to bring it home, they're trying to pitch this guy, Graham Platner, former machine gunner, murderer of at least dozens of innocent men, women, and children, decided that, my multiple tours of duty were not enough. I gotta get myself back in the game. Goes and works for rebranded Blackwater Constellus, I believe is what they were called, in 2018. Goes and murders more innocent people. Comes back home, and because this guy has some troll posts, very more than likely, on Reddit about this guy just seems like a total grifter of, now's the time for me to start pretending that I'm a communist because everyone knows that America's fucked, and I'm going to be able to find a way to elevate my profile off of this. This guy, if he had any integrity, would refuse to be a part of either mainstream political party, because they both support genocide. They both support impoverishment of the vast majority of people within the United States. They both support racism. They both support private health care. Democrats aren't going to do shit about it. Bernie failed in every regard and is continuing to fail more and more, and is honestly looking more like another fucking op. Sorry for getting randomly mad there. It's just, now this guy, Graham Platner, he just starts posting, I think I'm a communist on Reddit. Goes, posts in r/SRA, the Socialist Rifle Association, a couple of times, and talks about other types of wars that he wanted to fight in. This guy is a psychopath. He wanted to fight in the Philippines. Just when we should have seen that was the beginning of the U.S. Becoming a true globe bestriding empire at the, you know, during and at the end of the Spanish American Civil War by turning Cuba into a giant sugar plantation, and also proceeding to massacre. It was like 400,000 Filipinos when the U.S. Uh, colonized that country. That was a former Spanish territory that was taken over, and somehow the U.S. loosely justified. In order to beat the Spanish, we're going to kill hundreds of thousands of Filipinos senselessly. Um, that was when it, like, the U.S. just tries to coast off of World War II so fucking hard because that is like the only thing it could hold on to. And even when you look back at that, um, the U.S. had several multinational firms that were collaborating with the Nazis. Um, the U.S. was the perpetrator of some of the largest war crimes. Not just talking about the two, for lack of better phrasing, abominations and crimes against humanity that is just the biggest fucking understatement that can be said about dropping two atomic bombs. How the fuck can you use an atomic weapon on somebody? I mean, the fact that people legitimately talk about that is it's terrifying how many people in the US specifically think that that was okay. Um that was, you had Dresden as well, an absolute massacre firebombing, murdered 40,000 people, I believe. And what I was trying to say regarding Japan as well, you had the fire bombings of Tokyo that, in terms of sheer overall damage, ended up being worse than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, terrifyingly. And I think it's like 100,000 Japanese people were killed. And no, do not say that they had to be dropped in order to kill the fighting spirit of the Japanese people because they would die for the emperor. No. The bombs did not need to be launched in order to win the war in a relatively short amount of time. You literally just have to read the testimonies of every major U.S. admiral and general outside of absolute psycho Douglas MacArthur. Um, would probably avoid reading Patton too. People that actually had like that, were still, obviously, you have to be some kind of monster to become a general in the U.S. Imperial War Machine, but maybe not as outwardly slobbering psychopaths, although they ended up doing terrible things like Dwight D. Eisenhower, he was saying, because, like, he fucking overthrew the Guatemalan government, also orchestrated the assassination of Trujillo, the dictator of the Dominican Republic, with CIA assistance. So, yeah, sorry, I got a little off track there. It's so hard to account for all of the US's crimes. Um, but yeah, sorry, it's just hard to wrap my head around everything. So yeah, all the testimonies of people, even like Dwight D. Eisenhower, Admiral Nimitz, they said the Japanese are done. The U.S. dropped those bombs to essentially flex on the Soviets, who were rapidly advancing through Manchuria, smashing Japanese lines, and were going to end up being the ones that caused the Japanese to surrender. But the Japanese didn't want to surrender to the Soviets. Big reason being goes back to, I believe it was about 3 decades before the Russo-Japanese War. Japan absolutely spanked Russia, seized a lot of territory from them. Actually, it was more like 40 years ago. Probably more like, yeah, it was. I think it was like 40 years ago, in 1945. Apologies if I'm off on that. Might have been older. Might have been, um, not as long ago. But Japan spanked Russia, seized a bunch of territory from them. You end up surrendering to the USSR. You're going to end up, uh, having to give up a lot of territorial reparations. The atomic bombs just gave them a pretext to surrender to the US that just ended up turning the Japan into an economic zone of interest. Did the same thing with Germany. Um, those two countries, the two countries that were considered the axis of evil, received the most U.S. assistance, along with Europe at the end of World War II. Where was the aid for China? Where was the aid for the USSR? Oh, that's right. You have to start the Cold War that killed millions of people, tens of millions. But bringing it back home here, this guy Graham Platner likes fighting in these imperialist U.S. wars, hypothetically, and has voluntarily joined private military contractors that have committed massacres against, the Iraqi, Afghani people, probably in several conflicts throughout Africa, maybe some clandestine operations in, Central and South America. You know, they're active. Probably some stuff in Southeast Asia too, I'm sure. They're like I said, they're busy. Too busy. They should take a break. But this guy, was also seen recently drunk with his shirt off, just, I don't know, singing show tunes, some cringy bullshit. Probably like trying to sing Hamilton or some shit. And it's revealed he had a Totenkopf skull on his chest. And it's just like, oh, okay. You just thought this was a random skull? You just thought this was like the Jolly Roger or something? He said he did it when him and his mates got drunk. Looked a little too well done for an absolutely wasted tattoo to, come out looking as relatively clean as it looked, even in that relatively blurry camera footage in the video. It was still like clearly, yeah, that's the Totenkopf skull. The quality's not, as far as a drunk tattoo goes, looks almost a little too clean for that. Kind of not buying that story. But what tattoo shop are you walking into that you're seeing the Totenkopf skull, like on the wall as an idea? Just weird, man. Just weird that you happen to get the Nazi skull on accident out of. So there's so many ways that you can get a skull tattoo. There's like literally a theme of skull tattoos, and you just magically landed on one of the like Nazi themes, I guess. Also, you just haven't realized this whole time, like in like the probably decade and a half since you've had that's what the tattoo was, and you just decided it's cool to leave it there. I mean, you literally saw, I mean, of course, the U.S. PSYOP is supporting the remnants of the Ukrainian oligarchy as they continue to just take in U.S. and NATO money to the detriment of their country's entire future, um, as they continue to um, just fight an awful war in eastern Ukraine that was being oppressed by the Ukrainian government, but at the same time, the Russian government is an authoritarian oligarchy as well. You know, we it's we're not supposed to be choosing sides in inter-imperialist conflict. You should just look at the factors that are occurring within that conflict, and it was in the Donbass and Donetsk regions that we're trying to collective bargaining was banned by the Ukrainian government, and those regions were they were like, no, this is a fundamental right as like um, a human being in a functioning society ostensibly is to be able to bargain collectively. Nope, that was just banned by the Ukrainian government. So they were trying to have autonomous regions out there that were being run by leftists, and now it's just been years of unnecessary bloodshed as the U.S. has continued to sabotage peace talks. So this guy, Graham Platner, who would probably like to fight in that war too if he could, just because he has a couple of communist posts on Reddit, but has fought for basically the U.S. regime that would that didn't really, even though they fought against it, they were sympathetic to the Nazi regime in Germany, helped rehabilitate most Nazis to where by the 1970s, most of Germany's ministries, it was like the Ministry of the Interior was still 50% former Nazi party members and people that had served in the Wehrmacht. So just absolutely insane. The Nuremberg trials didn't do shit to get rid of the Nazis. They never fucking left. So it's just like this guy has Nazi iconography, which I guess in the Nazi sympathetic U.S. really isn't that much of a problem, but people are saying that this guy is based. He's in the Democratic Party. That this party is again genocidal. Supports wage slavery and actual slavery. Has supported building up cop cities. Yeah, I don't think a lot of communists are actually going to be able to make it through the DNC corporate Zionist genocidal stooge screening to become a senator. A branch, an element of the U.S. legislature strictly created to stifle any sort of popular sentiment in terms of legislation. Nah, miss me with that bullshit. This guy's a fucking grifter, and he's a war criminal that should be charged with mass murder. You re-enlist with a private military corporation, and you're telling me that he has a couple of Reddit posts, one of them saying, I wish I got to fight in different U.S. wars. He also said the U.S. Indian Wars. So, again, just supports settler colonialism. Yeah, I'm sure his position on Pisriol and its disgusting, at this point, 100-year campaign against the Palestinians has been going. He would support that shit. This guy's a monster. And people that ostensibly claim to be wanting to fight the powers in just the manufactured spaces that we have for quote unquote leftism and communism is that they're parading this guy as that guy. What are we doing, man? No. That's just, here we go. You got me talking so long. We gotta change the scenery. Actually, seems like probably a good point to end it if I have to change it for lighting reasons, the feel of the video. But are you trying to tell me that this is the guy that's going to be the one to pull us out of the hole, to finally get the world proletarian revolution going? You can even look in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, and I don't want these people to fail, but immediately after Zohran wins the primary, he starts doing damage control. That doesn't even need to be done by like doubling down on saying Israel has the right to Pisrael. Sorry, I mispronounced it. Has the right to self-defense, while being propped up to the tune of over $21 fucking billion by the U.S. government. Just to murder everyone that's died there is innocent. They're occupied by people from Russia, Poland, the U.S., Belgium, Australia, South Africa, just white colonizers from all over. Mostly. You got Mizrahi Jews as well, and you know, the occasional forced Arab collaborator, but primarily white, U.S., European, Western, just colonizers. That's what they are. Pisrael has always been a land grab project ever since it was birthed into being politically from the diseased mind of Theodore Herzl, and help brought into being materially by a whole bunch of people, but particularly the founders, David Ben-Gurion, the chief of settlement, Joseph Weitz, the first president, but also the guy that basically brought the British Empire in to control the mandate and prop up the Zionist government, Chaim Weizmann. I'll call them Herzl, Ben-Gurion. Also, just to do away with the kind of cool sounding mystique of their names, David Ben-Gurion's name was David Grun. He was Polish, I believe. Also, a good number like Ukrainians, a few other Eastern Europeans as well, make up the population of that illegitimate state. And then Chaim Weizmann, he kept it the same. So yeah, just that whole project by them was intended to be colonial. Theodore Herzl corresponded with Cecil Rhodes, where initially they were going to try and set up. This all happened way before the. Well, there have been several Holocausts that seem to get somehow forgotten or diminished because we think the Holocaust. Well, what about like the Armenian genocide, which we can't we just seem to not be able to recognize to, I don't know, throw a bone to the Turkish government or some bullshit. Um, but yeah, it's sorry that I'm a little all over the place here, but to kind of try to bring it back a little bit, just the way that a guy like Graham Platner that would stand, um, would agree to being one of the foot soldiers of empire repeatedly, get a Nazi tattoo, have a couple of Reddit posts saying I like communism, and we just all fucking believe this guy. Um, that's insane. Stop looking for heroes in the United States is what it needs to come down to. Gotta build. We gotta build ourselves up, man. We need to. You gotta be careful. It's probably not the best idea for me to even be putting this up here, but you need to see and be able to place faces with movements. You need to be able to see what people that believe in this stuff look like, and you need to see that people that you might not expect are able to look at the insane situations, um, crises and conflicts that are going on in the world, and thinking about them through a heuristic that doesn't involve capitalist brain poisoning, that is grounded but is able to be interlinked with other stuff if you're interested in it, more metaphysical stuff, but undergirded by a system that is that just gaslights you constantly. It says you need to go out and buy to support the economy. With again, your increasingly diminished real wages in relation to prices of basic necessities in the economy. And if you do go out and you support the economy, but then something tragic happens in your life, one bad day, and all of a sudden you're a piece of shit, you're irresponsible, and you deserve to be homeless. How could you think about not taking care of your finances? And then they sell taking care of your finances to you as a product rather than lending you a helping hand. So, just the United States is a slot machine. Vast majority of us will lose. Every once in a while someone comes out ahead, and then they sell their affluent lifestyle through whatever media channels they still think they have control of at this point. But people are breaking through. Unprecedented things have happened over the past, I mean, ever since 2001. But if we want to try and chop it up a little bit, um, you could say even 2016 was crazy time. That was kind of like full mask off in the US of, oh, this place is a joke. You could go back to '08, global recession. You've got COVID, was crazy. It's just a whole bunch of crazy. And what I'm trying to say is stop looking for people like Graham Platner, guy that looks and sounds like a CIA asset, to be the part of the communist vanguard. You've lost your mind and you want to absolve yourself of responsibility. Nah. Anyone that actually wants to get to work, anyone that is actually working, solidarity comrades here and all over the world, Does not believe one fucking thing this guy says. You should not be supporting a war criminal to be um, someone that might be able to chip in and alleviating um, both the precarious domestic situation for more and more people, millions and millions of more people in the U.S. every year, and the billions of people at the butts end or at the barrel end of U.S. rifles and tank barrels, and at the business end of just horrifying bombs all over the world. Um, we need to get over America being anything that's ever been worth anything. People like Graham Platner that think that fighting in these other like cool wars that go all the way back to the founding of the country, all you see in that is just a cataloging of horror show after horror show, genocide after genocide, mass crime against humanity after mass crime against humanity. Um, in that list, that a supposed communist like Graham Platner said is a war that he would like to fight in. No, no. America's done. America, just because the manufactured patriotic garbage goes away, it doesn't mean that the land goes away. It doesn't mean that your friends and family and community goes away. It just means maybe we can stop letting ourselves get exploited by our own government and corporate media, bureaucratic military intelligence, financial elite. Maybe we can stop that. And maybe along the way, help people all over the world not be at the mercy. Although, solidarity to everyone fighting back. I'm not saying everyone's just helpless here. But people at the business end of U.S. imperialism and U.S. Western setup financial imperialism through austerity packages baked into World Bank and IMF lending. First off, just I wish I could convey to people just how ignorant most Americans are of that stuff. And I'm not saying I'm a totem of knowledge, but they just don't talk about that stuff in the U.S. Through the mainstream channels. You have to have an itch to learn to even have your pulse on anything remotely real in the U.S. But there are a lot of people fighting back here, but you got to trust in yourself, and you got to trust in the people that you know around you, really know around you. Not a psyop like Graham Platner. So I'll sign off with that. Thank you for bearing with me. Again, I want to do these because I think a lot of people in these crazy times, and rightfully so, are trying to cobble together an understanding of what's going on and are focusing on the wrong things. There's a lot of mystification going on out there, but never lose sight of the fact that this is ultimately just see who's making money in this time, and they're the enemy right now. The world's not good, and if people that are raking in, harvesting even more at the expense of everyone else in this increasingly more dangerous, environmentally degraded, as well as geopolitically violent and domestically violent time. Mass shootings are up in an already high mass shooting country in the U.S. Um, all we've got is each other. And you're never really going to even be able to make those deep, deep connections that are absolutely necessary for solidarity without trusting yourself. Trust what you believe, and the only way that you can really solidify what that is, we've got to read. We're going to have to learn how to read again. We're going to have to read theory. We're going to have to read from great thinkers. And those recommendations I could give, I run through the spiel of um, the greats of Marxist theory that I'm talking about, but I want to let everyone else find their own path because some people maybe are a little more metaphysical, and I'm not here to lead people down the shining path or no, actually don't go down the shining path. That has genocidal implications in of itself. Fuck that. Um, but anyone that is interested in Marxism, Leninism, we could talk about that more. But you know, I know that that scares people away immediately. But reading up on that theory, you also get a good look at just actually examining the elements of history that led to uh, the real elements that led to economic and political uh, transformations that ultimately led to seismic shifts in social relations within societies. So I've talked a lot. Maybe, listen to this while you're drifting off to help with the um, intrusive thoughts, or this will probably exacerbate them more than anything. But appreciate you listening in. I just saw the stuff of Graham Platner, this CIA op getting just meteoric sudden rise through only online shit. I don't know who the fuck this guy is outside of I only really use YouTube occasionally. Um and it's just no, if we got it. That's why people need to read more and get off the internet, is so that you don't get brain poisoned by all of a sudden saying, let's look past the Nazi skull to get the supposed communist war criminal in office. Absolutely just off base.